You are listening to the Rooted Path Global Podcast. This is the podcast for faith leaders, community developers, funders, and field practitioners who believe that formation must come before mission. The Rooted Path is a 9-step congregational formation framework built on one conviction. What is formed is what gets scaled. Beneath the framework sits clear path intelligence, the technology layer designed to hold what formation reveals long enough for it to mature into infrastructure. Because the field has had theology, it has had methodology. What it has never had is a system to hold its memory. The companion book is now available on Amazon. Divine Assets, Faith-Based Leadership for a Global Movement. This is not a program. This is not a curriculum. This is the operating system the field has been missing. Formation before mission. Let us begin.
Our author was building a graphic this week for this explainer. Just 8 cards, 8 African civilizations, 1 line of text each. Sounds like totally routine work, right? You just check the dates, get the geography right, and make absolutely sure you don't misattribute ancient empires to modern borders. But then he got to the dates for the Kingdom of 𝐿𝐴𝐐𝐬, and he just had to stop, hard stop, because he was staring at a massive chronological gap, one that literally rewrites a narrative that, honestly, so many of us have been taught to just accept without question. Okay, let's dive into this. On the left side here, we've got the African Kingdom of 𝐿𝐴𝐐𝐬. They adopted Christianity as their state religion somewhere around 330 to 340 CE. Now look at the right. There's Rome. Rome didn't make it official until the Edict of Thessalonica in 380 CE. As the author points out, this isn't even a close call, guys. We're talking about an African kingdom formally embracing the religion roughly 40 to 50 years before Rome ever established it as their standard. And, this wasn't just some passive event. 𝐿𝐴𝐐𝐬 didn't get this handed down secondhand from a Western missionary. Notice King 𝐿𝐴𝐻𝑒na's completely independent actions here. He made the decision himself, he built the churches, and he commanded these vast trade routes connecting the Red Sea all the way to India and the Mediterranean. The whole point here is that when critics stand on the so-called authority of Western civilization to claim Africa contributed nothing, they are literally standing on ground that an African kingdom reached decades before Rome ever caught up. Let's move to the next era and see how this builds. A few centuries earlier, we find the Kingdom of Kush. Now, Kush didn't just neighbor Egypt. Kush's 25th dynasty actually ruled Egypt for nearly a century, from 747 down to 656 BCE. These were the Black Pharaohs. They built majestic pyramids at Nuri and Meroe, and they controlled the vital Nile trade that the entire ancient world depended on. So why does this matter for us today? Because it reminds us they were not just some little footnote to Egyptian history. They were a massive, defining chapter of it. Skip forward to the Mali Empire, and we run into the reality of Timbuktu. And listen, this isn't some myth. It's backed by hundreds of thousands of actual surviving manuscripts, all funded by that massive Sahara gold and salt trade. We are talking about staggering, highly advanced African scholarship in, and I want you to hear all of these, theology, mathematics, astronomy, law, medicine, commerce, and public life. Outsiders spent decades literally refusing to believe this paper and ink tradition even existed, simply because accepting it meant completely rewriting who gets credited with global scholarship. That exact same disbelief hit Benin. Back in 1897, British forces looted Benin's royal palace, and they uncovered these incredible bronze and brass works. They were created using a sophisticated lost wax casting technique that, frankly, still baffles some modern metallurgists today. But as these masterpieces entered European collections, the reaction was pure denial. Europeans insisted the work had to be Portuguese-influenced or from some mysterious lost non-African civilization. They simply refused to believe West African craftsmen independently developed such precise metallurgy. And really, the rest of the foundational African empires carry this exact same weight of undisputed, fully checkable history. Egypt gave the world one of its very first writing systems roughly 2,000 years before 𝐿𝐴𝐶𝐬 even enters the timeline. Ghana built the massive Sahara gold economy. Songhai leveraged that trade to become West Africa's absolute largest empire. And Oyo? They fielded a highly sophisticated administrative structure and dominated with their cavalry for 4 centuries. This brings us to a pretty harsh truth regarding that frequent, confidently delivered claim that Africa has contributed nothing to civilization or progress. As our author states so beautifully here, the claim only survives if nobody checks the calendar.
We just reviewed a chronological baseline that completely shatters that whole narrative. But the folks who make this claim often rely on another framework to justify their stance: Scripture. So let's go ahead and check that too.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how Genesis actually sets up the whole human story. If you look at Genesis 10, the Table of Nations, it establishes where every nation comes from. And Cush and Egypt, they're listed right there, right alongside everyone else. For centuries, though, interpreters tried to stretch a curse over all of Ham's African-linked descendants. But look at the actual text from just one verse earlier. Genesis 9:25 says, and I quote, "And he said, 'Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren.'" The curse fell strictly on Canaan, by name. Cush and Egypt are absolutely not named in it, not even close.
The scriptural sequence continues in Numbers 12, which records Moses marrying a Cushite woman. When Miriam and Aaron decide to object to this marriage, God's response is immediate, and it is severe. Miriam is struck with leprosy. Whatever the specific historic debates are about this passage, the text undeniably does not validate Miriam and Aaron's attempt to use the Cushite woman to criticize Moses. Instead, their challenge ends with God firmly affirming Moses and Miriam bearing a very heavy consequence.
Moving forward to Deuteronomy 23, the text drops all the ambiguity. This isn't just a narrative aside. Verses 7 and 8 are a direct Torah commandment, explicitly forbidding the hatred of Egyptians, and they mandate a path for full inclusion into the congregation by the third generation. Centuries before the prophets ever picked up the thread, the foundation was explicitly laid down. You do not hate Egypt. Then we reach the prophets. Isaiah 18 is a direct address to the kingdom of Cush. It doesn't ignore them. It doesn't write them out of the story. The prophetic text speaks directly to and completely acknowledges this powerful African kingdom, validating its profound, undeniable presence in the ancient world.
So the crucial point is how this all lands in the very next chapter. Isaiah 19 addresses Egypt, and yeah, it opens in judgment, but by verse 25, it takes a breathtaking turn. Read this verbatim with me. "Blessed be Egypt, my people, and Assyria, the work of my hands, and Israel, mine inheritance." Look at that. 3 nations, 3 blessings, given identical weight. Egypt, which was historically Israel's oppressor, actually receives the phrase, "my people." That's a title usually reserved for Israel alone. So we've got Genesis, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and Isaiah, 4 distinct, undeniable arguments that the author uses to completely push back against the claim that Africa contributed nothing.
Which brings us to the author's incredibly powerful concept, the erasure machine. The whole argument here is that claiming Africa contributed nothing isn't just some kind of passive ignorance. Ignorance is passive. This requires active maintenance. History is rarely erased by burning every single book. It's erased by teaching generations exactly which books never need to be opened. You literally have to actively try not to know about these 8 documented civilizations. You have to stop reading 4 biblical books early just to keep saying nothing happened here. It is an active machine built entirely to erase. But machines of erasure aren't the only things being built. Let's look back at Isaiah 19, specifically verses 23 and 24. Isaiah prophesies a physical highway out of Egypt to Assyria. Now remember, historically, Assyria was a brutal empire that destroyed the northern kingdom, and Egypt had enslaved Israel. This is a vision of a road connecting the most bitter of ancient enemies. It's a highway designed so that they walk toward each other, standing alongside Israel, stepping into a shared blessing rather than walking away. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly where we are today. We are living in the most physically and digitally connected version of the human story that has ever existed. When you look at modern global flight paths, shipping lanes, the millions of miles of undersea cables, and the digital networks sitting right in our pockets, you and I are literally using a highway between nations that were once completely sealed off from each other by geography and history. Which leaves us with this final, truly profound question. One Earth, one human story. We know the highway is already built. We can measure the flights, we can trace the cables, we can see the digital connections. But will we use this unprecedented global connectivity to finally dismantle the erasure machine and recover one another's stories? Or are we just going to use it to erase them faster than we ever could before?
Stay rooted, my friends. 𝐷AMian Kurd is the founder and CEO of Kingdom Assets LLC and the architect of the Rooted Path, a 9-step congregational formation framework. He operates on the oldest theology in the room, love thy neighbor. He writes at the intersection of faith, community infrastructure, and the formation work that holds both together. rootedpathglobal.com.
Thank you for spending time with me. If this conversation moves something in you, share it with someone doing the work alongside you. I'm 𝐷𝐮𝐸 𝐶𝐫𝐚𝐬𝐿, still operating on the oldest theology in the room. Love thy neighbor. Until we meet again, stay rooted, my friends.